These are my top 10 fantasy series of all time. Hey friends, welcome back to my channel. It's Tori, and today we are going to spend this entire video gushing about my top 10 favorite fantasy series. This is one of my favorite videos to do all year. I don't do a ton of top 10 videos because I do feel like they tend to get repetitive, but I love this one because it gives me a great kind of annual checkpoint to see how my tastes have changed, if at all, which series have stayed tried and true and stick with me and stay in their spots on my top 10 list. There has been a little bit of shifting since last year, which I'm very excited about, and I love having these videos as kind of a benchmark for me to look back and see which series have climbed to the top at any given year during my reading experience. If you don't see your favorites here, that is absolutely okay. Please put them down in the comments below and let me know what your top 10 of all time is. I would love to see it. There are a couple of rules that I kept myself to when I was compiling this list. The first one is that it has to be a series at least 3 books long, and I have to have read at least 2 of the books in that series in order to put it on this list. The second rule is that for this list, it is going to be fantasy only. That is why you're not going to see Red Rising on this list, etc. Red Rising is one of my favorite series of all time. It is right up there at the top of this list, but because it is science fiction merged with fantasy, I left it off of the list this time just because it causes some confusion in the comments, so I just figured we'd leave it alone. But shout out to one of my favorite series of all time, Red Rising. We're gonna give it a little bit of love anyway. Now, just because I'm sharing my recommendation for these to you guys as a reading audience, I do recognize that not every series is for every person. So if you got to one of these series and you just didn't like it or weren't interested, that's completely okay. So let's start with my first one, which is an honorable mention, because what is a top 10 video without at least one honorable mention? And I honestly could have put several here, but I wanted to give a brief shout out to a series, a very unique series that I started and read this last year, and I'm almost finished with it. I only have the last book left. And I really wanted to give it a moment of spotlight here because I do feel like it is not talked about enough in our fantasy community, and I feel like it is one of the most unique fantasy series I have read in a long time. And that, of course, is The Books of Babel by Josiah Bancroft. I have read 3 out of the 4 books in this series, and I gotta tell you guys, the more I sit with this series, the more I enjoy it in retrospect. I enjoyed my experience reading it, but it's really on the past reflection where this series starts to take hold, I think. This series is about a man named Thomas Senlin who takes his newlywed wife to the Tower of Babel, which is a massive landmark in their world. And it's the tourist destination of the century, and everyone who's anyone goes there. However, very quickly at the base of the tower when they arrive, Thomas loses his wife Maria and spends basically the rest of the series trying to get her back. Now that may seem a little simplistic at first glance until we get into the tower. Each level of the tower has its own horrors and wonders, and each one is this very distinct culture and purpose within the whole. Thomas Senlin is also an incredibly unique hero within fantasy. He's a school teacher. He's not the big brave hero. He is kind of stumbling along, just trying to survive and do his best. And he's very endearing in that way. I found him very lovable very quickly, and he meets a lot of people along the way, people and non-humans along the way who add to his journey in some way, or in some cases take away from it. If you are a prose person, this series might be something you want to check out because Josiah Bancroft's prose is the type that makes you stop and rewind and read something again, not because it was confusing, but because it was just so beautiful. And I am not usually a prose snob, but this series might have given me a +1 in that direction, because it was just so beautiful, and I had to stop and exclaim about it every once in a while to my husband, who absolutely loved this series. This is one of his favorite series. So I just wanted to throw this up in the honorable mention spot because I do think that it deserves the attention. In the number 10 spot, we have the Farseer trilogy by Robin Hobb. Now, I've had a very roller coastery experience with Robin Hobb's series in Realm of the Elderlings, because I read Farseer quite a few years ago, really enjoyed it. I did enjoy Fitz as a main character. He is our only protagonist perspective throughout the trilogy, and he is one of those characters where some people really love him, some people really cannot get along with him, and that's going to really kind of dictate your experience with the trilogy, I think. However, Robin Hobb's character work throughout this series is absolutely beautiful. It is a slow burn, stick with it until the payoffs hit kind of series, which you'll notice there's a pattern in a lot of the series I'm going to bring up in this video, because I love a slow burn with some fabulous payoffs, and Robin Hobb is a master at it. Farseer, of course, continues on in the Realm of the Elderlings series with the Live Ship Traders trilogy, which I did bounce off of this last year. It was not for me, but I do intend to go back and delve back into the world of Fitz and the Fool and all of those characters, because I do miss them, and Robin Hobb writes in such a way that it really feels, every time you open that book, like you're coming home. There's a comfort in her writing style, despite all of the awful things she puts her characters through. It's always a comfort read in a lot of ways. Just the way she writes, the way that she cares about her characters, and the way that she brings you into their lives is so beautiful and so memorable that I couldn't not put this in my top 10 list, despite the fact that I have had kind of ups and downs with the Realm of the Elderlings as a whole. In that number 9 spot, we are going to have The Riverfall Chronicles by Jacqueline Hagan, which begins with the Wickwire Watch. This series, sometimes there are several series on this list where I can't believe that this was someone's debut series. It just is mind-blowing a little bit to me that somebody just woke up and was like, I'm gonna write this story, and it's that good. Jackie really hit it out of the park with the atmosphere and the tone in this series. We follow Inkwell Featherfield, who is a young boy, very much a la Lies of Locke Lamora, Artful Dodger from Oliver Twist, that sort of vibe. And he is wrapped up in a political war between two sides who absolutely hate and fear each other. And he starts learning what's behind the curtain, so to speak. This series is a genre mashup. And that's something that I really want to highlight about it, because it's one of my favorite aspects of the Riverfall Chronicles. I love how Jackie has taken Gaslamp kind of Dickensian Victorian atmosphere and melded it with an epic fantasy storyline. It's brilliant, and it's something that I have never seen before, the way that she does it, and it's so interesting. And there's bits of slice of life in there. There's some really tense action scenes. There's a magic system that has an emotions-based factor to it. The motley crew of characters that Jackie invites us into and introduces us to in this series, I still hold all of them very near and dear to my heart, and every time I open the pages of this series, it is like coming home. This is another series that if you settle in and you let Jackie take you on the journey with these characters, it's gonna be a comfort read, and it's gonna bring you back over and over and over again. All right, guys, now we need to move to the OG. At number 8, we have Mistborn Era 1. Now, Mistborn is the first adult epic fantasy series I ever read. And I think that's true for a lot of people here on BookTube, a lot of us in the fantasy sphere. We kind of were led through the gate of Mistborn, and that just opened up a amazing world of books and series by authors all over the world who have delighted us since. And with that in mind, Mistborn stays on my top 10 list and has been on it for this long simply because the sense of wonder that it evoked when I read it, and the way that it expanded my understanding and excitement about fantasy has never dimmed. I still hold that this is Brandon Sanderson's best series, and I think Mistborn specifically, as you walk into this world where the premise is, what if the Dark Lord won? What if the world is dark? What happens? How do we survive? How do we fight back against that? How do we turn the tide back to anything good? If you like to know how your magic works and dig into those harder magic systems, Mistborn is a fantastic place to start. I remember just being so intrigued by it all when I read it for the first time, and this one definitely deserves a reread. I am hoping to go back and reread these at some point in the near future because I miss the nostalgia of this series so much. There's so many hard-hitting moments. The world, I think, is really a strong suit of this trilogy, and it's just so bleak and gritty, but there's that pulse of desperate determination throughout the entire series that I'm really drawn to in the stories that I read within that kind of survival context. This series, I think, is going to be on my top 10 list for the foreseeable future, simply because of what it offered me at the very beginning of my fantasy reading career, and I still love it. Next up, we are going to shift over to some Asian-inspired wuxia fantasy in the Mortal Techniques series by Rob J. Hayes. Mortal Techniques is comprised of these 3 standalone novels with a novella and a short story alongside it, but I'm going to mostly focus on the 3 novels because that's the part of the series that I'm really drawn to. For those of us who grew up on shonen anime or kung fu movies or samurai films, this series is absolute gold. I love this trilogy of books, and I know that Rob J. Hayes has mentioned in the past that he does intend to continue the series. These 3 books are technically standalones, but they do weave together a little bit with Easter eggs and crossover characters in a way that I really like, because as you go through the series, you're gonna get little bits and pieces under the surface that are there for the readers of the whole series. And I love that. Spirits of Vengeance was one of my favorite books of the last few years. I absolutely loved it. I love the characters in all 3 of these books. There's a great motley crew, especially in book 1 and book 2. The way that Rob Hayes combines action with that wuxia style magic and the world, Asian-inspired world with all of these spirits and you know, the gods kind of meddling in the world of men is so good. He has a great sense of humor. The characters all feel very vibrant and interesting, and each of them have abilities that are just really cool and inventive. There's a character arc in Never Die that I absolutely love and I still think about. Spirits of Vengeance made me so emotional. I love this series, you guys, and I highly, highly recommend it, and there was no way it wasn't going to be in my top 10 list. Next up, we have the one and only Greenbone Saga, written by Fonda Lee. This series is another one that I think has grown in the level of appreciation I have for it over the time since I put it down. Jade City is a modern epic fantasy that follows these different kind of mafia families in a world that's feels very reminiscent of a twist on modern day Asia. The magic system within this trilogy surrounds the use of jade, which has magical properties for certain class of people, and the discussions around who can use jade and who can't use jade is very much at the heart of this entire trilogy, but it is just an incredibly expansive, deep, layered world. Fonda Lee really knows how to write economy and sociology and political tensions across multiple countries within this trilogy, and the way that it continued to expand through every book was just mind-blowing. Her action sequences and the characters that she created in this series have stuck with me long after I finished reading Jade Legacy. The payoff in this series cannot be overstated. The end of Jade Legacy, I was an absolute mess. I cried so much in this last book. I'm gonna read you guys a quote by Fonda Lee that kind of, I think, encapsulates the way that she writes her characters, and it's one of my favorite writing quotes of all time now. The term epic fantasy conjures an expectation of vast continents, kingdoms, and armies, the rise and fall of nations. But there is also an epic scale to be found in a single life, in the seasons of a marriage, in seeing one's children grow into adulthood, in passing hopes and dreams as well as burdens and sorrows from one generation down to another. That's so much at the core of what this series means to me, that in the scope of everything that's happening between these nations and the action-packed tension of all three books, she never loses sight of those small moments and these people in the midst of this massive conflict trying to have some kind of normal life, to pass something on to their children, to make the world a little better than it was, to fight for family even when it causes them to make some really morally ambiguous decisions. I think that because of that, it elicits a lot of thought and a lot of interesting discussions about the decisions that the characters make throughout all three books. Next up is a series that I knew pretty much from the first book was going to be on my top 10 list, and when I read book 2, that feeling only solidified 10 times more than it was even in book 1, and that is Land of Exile by J.L. Odom. This is an incomplete trilogy that is currently comprised of By Blood, by Salt, and A Haunt for Jackals. Book 3 should be out in the very near future. I know that she's currently working on it. This series is really hard for me to encapsulate in a short space of time like this, but J.L. Odom kind of exploded onto the fantasy scene when she entered the self-published fantasy blog-off competition last year, and she ended up winning it, which, after reading the first book, there was no doubt in my mind, long before the end of the competition, that this was a book that deserved a win because of how incredibly powerful and beautiful and well-written it was. J.L. Odom's military and linguistics background comes full front and center in this series in an atmosphere very inspired by Middle Eastern cultures, and it's just absolutely beautiful. I'm still struggling to find words for how much I love this series months and months after reading both of the books. If J.L. Odom is able to stick that third book landing as well as she has written the first 2 books in this series is going to absolutely be one of my top favorites of all time, potentially even higher than I have placed it now. You guys know that I love a deep, slow burn character study. I love getting inside the minds of those characters and seeing them grow and change and learn and struggle against their environment and their situation and their beliefs. I live for that kind of storytelling, and J.L. Odom pulls that off in such a fresh, distinct style that I haven't really seen before. And she utilizes a specific character arc style in this book, that the first book, that I can't actually explain to you guys because it would ruin the entire experience. It's so interesting and I absolutely love it. One of my favorite female characters of all time in fantasy is in this series, and you meet her kind of towards the end of book 1. I mean, the atmosphere, the focus on translation and linguistics, and the struggle of someone who is in a land that is not their own and is oppressed and looked down on, and him trying to stay in that place of dignity and strength throughout that experience, and seeing how his fortunes turn and morph and change throughout the first 2 books has been one of the best reading experiences I've had in years and years and years, and I absolutely love this series, and I can't say enough good things about it. I'm sure you guys are sick of me talking about it this last year, but honestly, this series is something really special. Speaking of really special, let's go to our number 4 spot, which is The Long Price Quartet by Daniel Abraham. This is a series that is so outside the mainstream of what we have come to expect from traditional fantasy tropes and story structure. If you're looking for a familiar kind of hero's journey, step-by-step dragons and action-packed fantasy excitement, this is not the series where you're going to find those things. This is a series for the people who love to deeply understand the characters that they're traveling with through a story. This is for the readers who want to see the ripple effect caused to nations by the individual decisions of a single character. This is a series for people who want to see one of the most, if not the most, unique magic system I have ever read in fantasy that literally entails magicians, who are called poets, being able to construct a physical manifestation out of words, and any little deviation or mistake can cause catastrophic effects. One of my favorite romances in fantasy is in this series. Daniel Abraham's prose is also something that I will mention here because just like in Books of Babel, I kept going back. I'd read a sentence and then I would just stop and I'd just want to savor it. It was so beautiful. It was thought-provoking. It really made me just want to sit with it for a while. And I love stories like that. This series is also Asian inspired, but it's a lot more subtle than a lot of the other Asian inspired series that I have read, and I really enjoyed that about it. The world building is so incredibly layered that it feels like you are walking through a portal into a world that has always existed, that there should be history textbooks about, because of course it existed. And that's such a skill to pull off as an author. So huge kudos to Daniel Abraham for this series, because from the first book, I knew I was reading a masterclass in non-traditional fantasy. All right, guys, we are getting into the top 3 series for me of all time. And honestly, all 10 of these series have meant so much to me over my experience of reading fantasy. I dearly love all of them. And these top 3 really represent kind of the heart of my channel in a lot of ways at this point. One of them is new, and I'm sure nobody's going to guess what it is. But I'm going to keep you in limbo for a minute about where it's going to land within that top 3. As you've been watching this video up to this point, I'm sure you've noticed that I talk about character a lot. I am a highly character-driven reader. An amazing plot, an amazing magic system, an amazing, world building, whatever else, incredible prose is not going to pull me into a story the way a deeply written character will. And all of these series on my top 10 list focus on character to some extent, usually to a lot of extent. But these top 3 especially, I could talk about for hours. So without further ado, number 3 in my top 10 fantasy series of all time is The Gentleman Bastards by Scott Lynch. I love this series. I don't know what else to say about it, honestly. Like, The Lies of Locke Lamora, especially the first book, it's like it was written for me in so many ways. It is gritty, it is dark. We have a ragtag motley crew of young thieves and con men who are learning how to just survive in the undertow of this almost Venetian-style city. The world building in this series is something that I always say Scott Lynch does not get enough credit for, because it's so vibrant, it's so real. And Locke as a protagonist, that kind of scruffy, snarky, has a good heart despite himself protagonist is something I have always loved, and it is no different. One of the things that I also love about it, though, is that none of these characters are perfect. They are struggling in moral ambiguity in a situation that is really hard. It's a lifestyle that is really hard and very dangerous. And the relationships that they form and the dangers that they face is so intense and fun to read, but also the emotional impact is so strong with them. And I love that. I love it so much. It's very heisty, which is something I would love to read more of in fantasy. I'm constantly on the hunt for fantasy heist style storytelling because of this series. This series overall just is such a comfort read for me. I am planning on rereading the first book this year just to go back and spend some time with it because it's been a long time since I've read it. Locke and Jean are my fantasy bromance. They are my favorite pair of besties pretty much in all of fantasy. I absolutely love them. They're such a fantastic contrast to each other, and the way that the story is told through them is just, it's so good, you guys. It's so good. That's all. Moving on. Number 2 on my top 10 fantasy series of all time is a series that I have only recently fallen in love with. And by recently, I mean in the last 2 years, last year and a half. This is a series that blasted into my favorites list so quickly and so deeply that it almost kind of sent me spinning, if I'm being honest. And that is The City Watch by Sir Terry Pratchett. This is part of his larger Discworld universe, but it is a contained series of a completed 8 books. I have read 6 out of those 8 books. This series is so intelligently written. It is very humorous. It is very deep at the same time. And I think that is the power of The City Watch, because within this series, we meet so many of my favorite characters of all time. Pratchett's British humor is just on full enthusiastic display here. With his motley crew of characters, Pratchett pushes that line of caricature so closely without ever tipping over. He has this series in the palm of his hand the entire time, and he knows fantasy storytelling so well and loves it so deeply that he's able to make fun of those tropes and those familiar elements in a way that's actually funny, in a way that's intelligent. It's so intelligent. And that's the thing for me, is I don't often like humor in my fantasy novels. I like funny characters. I like a little bit of kind of tongue-in-cheek now and then, but true humor or satire is something that I do not go for hardly ever. In this series, the humor is absolute perfection, and it is married to Pratchett's commentary on everyday life, on the things that human beings struggle with and deal with and live through every day. It's so relatable. It's so relatable. And he delves into every possible theme of humanity that he can, and does each one of them in a way where he's never talking down to you as a reader. We're having a discussion together. And I can't say enough good things about this series, you guys. I absolutely love The City Watch by Terry Pratchett. This series has meant so much to me the last year and a half, and there was absolutely no way that it wasn't going to be in my top 5, top 3, and then I finally sat down and realized that it absolutely belongs right here in the top 2 spots. Which, of course, leads to my final choice for this top 10 list. This is a series that has been deeply ingrained in who I am as a reader, who I am as a writer for the last decade plus of my life. It was the series that made me want to become an epic fantasy writer. I'd always had it in me, but this was the series that pushed me over the edge. And that is Malazan Book of the Fallen by Steven Erikson. I've only read 4 books of this series, you guys, and I'm not unaware of the fact that depending on how my experience with the last 6 books goes, this may shift at some point. I don't know. However, the first 4 books alone earn this series this number 1 spot. Dead House Gates is my favorite fantasy novel of all time, which is book 2 in this series. And there's so many things that can be said about this series. I could be here for hours. So what I will say in brief is that I have never read anything with the kind of scope that Erikson creates in Malazan Book of the Fallen. It is so vast and so deeply layered with hundreds of thousands of years of history. He literally took the entire history of a world and gave it to us in a fantasy series. He does not hold the hand of his readers. That is not the type of series this is. You are dropped right in the middle of this massive conflict and many smaller conflicts between multiple continents and tons of different POVs and characters to follow who are all fighting their own individual battles. And that, I think, for me, is where the magic of Malazan truly rests, is the vast scope is cradled in the intimate storytelling of really emotionally investing characters. A lot of people say that this series is the most intimidating, the most complex. It's so hard to read, and I would disagree with that. I think it's a commitment, like a lot of larger series. And like I said before, Erikson does not hold your hand when he takes you through this series. It is not the type of series that is going to be a popcorn read. It is not the type of series that you're going to be able to just binge through the pages. It is the type of series that will bring you in to the world. It will allow you to make all of your own decisions about the characters, the events, the conflicts that are going on. Erikson lets you into this world. He doesn't lead you through it. And I love that. It's very much like an open world video game where you're going to explore so many different corners of the story. You're going to meet so many different characters from so many different walks of life. And the emotional impact every single time is so big and so earned. The payoffs in each individual book are just monumental. I've never read anything like it. Now, I will say that there are things about this series that might prove to be hurdles to different readers. Between some of the books, you switch continents and character casts, and he's asking you to play a long game when you read this series. And I can completely understand for the people who have read or tried this series that it just wasn't for them. I completely understand that. I just think that this series, when it meets the right type of reader for the style that it is pure magic, and I love it so much. And I can't wait to continue my read of the series. I'm currently doing a reread and intending to continue on through the final 6 books that I haven't read yet. But if I had to judge on nothing else but the first 4 books that I've read and never read another Malazan book for the rest of my life, it would still be on the #1 spot, and those books are always going to mean a lot to me. That is my top 10 fantasy series, the 2025 edition. I would, again, love to know down in the comments below. Let me know what your top 10 are, what you think of this list. Did I surprise you with the placement of any of these series? I'd love to know. Check out all of the links down below in my description box to my books, my Patreon, all of the things if you are interested in any of that. If you're new here, welcome. I hope you're having a great week, and I hope all of you are reading some 5-star reads, and I will see you in the next video.